All right, well, moving on now. Connecting the dots for a global OOH ecosystem is where we're headed. That's going to be the topic of this discussion. A technology and marketing executive with a passion for disruption. Her work has been featured in Forbes, Wired magazine, Technology Headlines, and other top publications. And she was a 2021 nominee of Canada's Top 40 Under 40 list. She joins us all the way from Toronto. Ladies and gentlemen, President of Canadian Out-of-Home Marketing and Measurement Bureau, please welcome on the stage with a truly loud round of applause. Welcome, Amanda Dorenberg. Welcome, Amanda. Thank you so much for being here. That's the energy. Let's have it.
Thank you. I like to roam the stage, so I hope that's okay for everyone. How's everybody doing? We're quiet. Come on. It's exciting. It's 3 o'clock in the morning my time, so if I'm this excited, y'all should be more excited. Let's go. Thank you, everybody, for having me today. I am very excited to be here. It's an honor to speak. For those of you who don't know me, that's me. Please feel free to follow me on the social platforms listed on the left and also the content platforms on the right. As per my intro, I do a lot of submissions and writing for various different publications, including Forbes, Entrepreneur, Fast Company, and Rolling Stone. And the purpose of that is really to drive awareness for our amazing community in the out-of-home space. So what I'm here to talk to you about today specifically is data and bringing globality to the out-of-home space. For those of you unfamiliar with COMMB, COMMB is the national not-for-profit association that provides both measurement as well as marketing services in the Canadian space. But as you will see later on, we are also expanding some of our offerings, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I really want to speak on how we're driving innovation, specifically within the out-of-home space. We have such a powerful media format. It's vibrant, it's larger than life, and it's also data-driven, whether that be static, classic, or digital, whether it be programmatic digital out-of-home, or whether it be any type of traditional direct I/O campaign. Data is really driving what we're doing from an innovation perspective. And so I wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit. But in order for us to really understand how we can leverage data to enhance our offering, to ensure that we can increase our media spends from those 5, 6, 10% of the overall ad budgets, I wanted to dive a little bit into the evolution of socioeconomics. And this is really to understand the consumers specifically. So who's actually spending on the products that we, as marketers, are looking to advertise? The products that we're leveraging this beautiful media format of out-of-home to drive these ad spends. So before I get into that, can I just see by a show of hands, how many people in this room are publishers, media owners? Okay, good majority. And advertisers? Not a lot, but I love it. Thank you. Probably some of the next slides are going to be a little more familiar to the advertisers and brands versus maybe some of the publishers. And the reason why I wanted to bring these slides to our attention is to really understand the way that economics are changing in the sense of who's actually driving consumer spends and the bulk of the dollars being leveraged from consumers specifically. So we could talk about boomers specifically. This is our first sort of generation. This is a generation that was born between 1955 and 1964, currently aged 59 to 68. There's some pretty interesting statistics here that speak to how this particular demographic and this particular generation are moving their money, how they're using their money. So interestingly, 21% plan to retire with a mortgage. What does that mean to us if we're unpacking this from a spend perspective? They're probably saving a little more. They're more focused specifically on their retirement plans than perhaps frivolous spending, like some of the other generations that we will talk to. When we look at Gen X, which is the generation that was born between 1965 and 1980, currently aged 43 to 58, very interesting stat that they have $115,000 as their annual disposable income. So this is after all of their bills are paid, $115,000. These are US dollars. So $115,000 of disposable income that they're able to purchase products for. So how are we as marketers speaking to this particular generation, as well as some of the other generations that we're going to talk about? And again, there's some other interesting stats here that I'm sure y'all can read. Millennials, which happens to be my generation. Millennials were born between 1981 and 1996, currently aged 27 to 42. I happily just celebrated my 40th birthday in April. It was lovely. So very excited to be part of this generation. Interesting statistics here that millennials tend to have about 85,000, these are US dollars, of disposable household income. Again, this is after all of our bills are paid, about $85,000 that we'd like to ensure that marketers are driving content to us to be able to spend appropriately. Interesting stat here, 78% of my generation prefer to spend on experiences rather than items, than tangible items. We really value experiences. So this is somewhat of a younger generation. We also represent 2.5 trillion with a T, trillion dollars in spending power. Again, these are US dollars. That's a lot of money. So how are we as marketers leveraging our data from a globality perspective to be able to target and speak to this very powerful demographic? And I think the next generation is actually going to probably be a little more shocking. So Gen Zs, which is the youngest generation, born between, forgive my memory, 1997 and 2012, currently aged 11 to 26. This is a very young generation. But this is the digital era. This is the generation that are truly digitally focused, attached to their phones. They have $360 billion, billion with a B, in disposable income as a generation. And this is the next generation that's actually driving consumer spending. Interesting fact, although they are very digitally centric as a generation, they actually trust traditional media more than most other demographics. So what does that mean for us? Are we a traditional media? Come on. We are, but we're an innovative traditional media format. So Gen Zs tend to trust both out-of-home as well as print as their two sort of top traditional media formats. So again, I wanted to incorporate these stats before we actually get into how we're leveraging data, because the audience of which we're speaking to is so incredibly important. It's very contextually relevant as to how we're targeting this, how we're leveraging these marketing dollars, how we're looking at our strategies from an out-of-home perspective, whether we are a publisher or whether we are a buyer or a brand or a marketer. So let's talk about some of the interesting challenges as well as some incredible opportunities that we have. Why is it that out-of-home globally only accounts for anywhere between 5%, upwards of 15%, depending on the market that you're in, of total overall ad spends? That's a small number compared to other media formats. Digital, of course, is taking the lion's share of the advertising spend. So one of the interesting components relative to planning and buying for digital media specifically is its ease of purchasing. Its ability to have data directly into agency, brand, buyer dashboards. It's very simplistic. It's easy to prove out efficacy. It's easy to prove the ROI because the data tells me so. So how can we take advantage of that in the out-of-home space in order to ensure that we get a fair portion of the ad spends? We heard it earlier from a couple of our guest speakers that out-of-home is powerful. I can tell you a personal story about out-of-home. I used to work in fashion. I was a model for many years. And I recall my first billboard where I saw my advertising campaign and myself on a billboard in Toronto. It's called Yonge Dundas Square, which is basically like the Times Square of New York. And I remember looking up thinking, wow, this thing is larger than life. And it was the first time I ever really realized that out-of-home was so impactful and powerful. And little did I know that I would ultimately end up working in this space, but it is powerful. So again, with the onset of data and the ability for planners and buyers to leverage MMM, which is media mix modeling softwares, there's an opportunity, there's a challenge, as well as an opportunity, for the out-of-home industry to leverage these platforms and to take data and analytics to power and fuel what we are doing in the out-of-home space in a very similar capacity that other mediums are also using. Need some water. When we look at data, data equals excitement. Buyers and planners love data. Provides attribution, efficacy, ROI. It's easy to ensure that we can prove the plans that we have put together for our clients. These are Canadian stats, but I'm going to show you a global stat on the next page. So if we look at traditional versus digital ad spends specifically, we can see traditional is black. It's laying flat. And digital, meaning native online, search, social, et cetera, is continuing to grow. We have to compete with this. And in order for us to compete and to be able to thrive with providing attribution, data analytics, we need to ensure that we provide excitement. How do we provide excitement? It's by ensuring that we have the tools to do so. If we look at coverage on the chart on the right-hand side specifically, I brought up because there are some very similar components here that represent the challenges of purchasing TV. This, yes, it's a TV stat, but not dissimilar to out-of-home. There are some challenges that resonate with our community, I would say, and there's a couple of buyers in the back I might call on afterwards. But publisher fragmentation is one. Creating personalization. So we know that with digital out-of-home specifically, we can create personalized contextual advertisements. We can target an audience very specifically. I would say that that's less of a challenge. But I think publisher fragmentation and viewership fragmentation are two very good examples of some of the challenges that we have with planning and buying out-of-home. When we look at the comparative between traditional out-of-home as well as digital out-of-home on a global scale, very interesting stats coming out of Statista, which is a great platform. If you're not familiar with it, they have incredible stats, given their name. These are projections that real numbers as well as projections that are through to 2026 that talk about the transition between digital out-of-home to traditional out-of-home. And we can see that traditional is going to go, it's going to level out. It's flattening. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Digital out-of-home is going to grow. I think in both cases, we can continue to increase the needle if we actually provide context, data, and make it easier for planners, buyers, and brands to purchase our media format. So we talked about dashboards and media mix modeling platforms previously. One of the interesting components is that out-of-home right now is not incorporated in most of the global MMM applications. So Nielsen has a media mix modeling application. There's a number of independent companies that in various different markets that offer MMM applications. But out-of-home traditionally is not included in those. And that's because there's a lack of data. And that's to no one's fault necessarily. But I also think that some of our out-of-home publishers and organizations tend to take a linear lens when they're looking specifically at how to enhance our offering. We tend to say, well, we're a traditional medium. It doesn't matter that I have static inventory. I'm only going to use data for my digital inventory. But we can leverage that same data for both classic or static as well as digital out-of-home. So what I'm here today to talk about is how we in the Canadian marketplace, and I hope that this inspires you globally as to what we're doing, And I'd love to talk to you all after if you have any questions. But in the Canadian space, we are ingesting over 6.7 million road segments. And when I say a road segment, we have mapped every single roadway across the country. These road segments incorporate directional, vehicular, as well as pedestrian volumes, speed information, and intersection flow data. Intersection flow data provides us the information of what percentage of traffic turns left versus goes right versus straight through an intersection. This data is enhanced. So this is ground truth data. So we ingest various different municipal data sources. We aggregate that with connected cars, GPS data, smart city data, as well as GDPR-compliant SDK data. We have a very rigorous component as to how we weed out any type of fraudulent SDK, which is software development kit, GPS data in mobile devices. We have a very rigorous approach to do that to ensure that we are GDPR and CCPA, which is California Consumer Privacy Act, as well as the Canadian legislation compliancy. But this data is massive, and I understand that not every country globally has access to this data. There are a number of other ways that you can enhance or leverage what we would call ground truth. So this data to us is our ground truth data. Other components, there's a lot of beacon technology, so companies like Mobilytics or Docma provide very unique modeling services. When we incorporate this data with this is our ground truth data. When we incorporate this data with our mobile GPS data, it allows us to provide very granular hourly information. So these 6.7 million data points are ingested on an hourly basis across 8 different day parts. You might say, well, why do you have 8 different day parts? There's only 7 days in a week, right? So we have Monday through Sunday and then an average day. Monday through Sunday being the 7 days of the week and an average day representing the 8th day part. This data is ingested on an hourly component, and we output a number of really robust offerings for our publishers as well as our agency partners within the Canadian space. We've also developed a tool called Roadmap. So this is a screenshot of the application that we have developed. This is a fully proprietary software application that we have built in-house. It's taken us about 18 months to develop it. We will launch later this year. But it encompasses both what we would consider a production and a planning tool. Production side of things being for the publishers in the room, your inventory management, so how many assets do you have, what the long and lat is, what the facing direction is, whether it is illuminated, if it's a static location, if it's a digital location, what is your loop or your loopless environment, if you're working in a loopless space. So that's what we would encompass as the production side of things. On the planning side for the buyers and brands that are in the house, we have a very robust mapping tool, which you can see a screenshot here of. It does have some real-time analytics on the bar that comes out on the right-hand side. As you sort of scroll into the mapping environment and you leverage your filtering components to decide what type of campaign you want, what audience, what demographic, what socio-demographic, lifestyle, psychographic you're looking to target. The data churns in real time on the right-hand side and will update. There's a tabular drawer that comes up on the bottom that showcases your information, and you can export this, you can save it, it's all permissioned. One of the great things from a publisher perspective is the ability to only see, as a publisher, your own information, because obviously if you're working from an inventory management perspective, you don't want to see your competitors, maybe you do, but you probably shouldn't see your competitors' information. From a planning perspective, the agencies and the buyers can see all information. They can see every publisher, every media owner's data, all in one ecosystem. It also levels the playing field from a publisher perspective and from a brand perspective so that as a buyer, it's easy to use one tool, one dashboard, to be able to see every single publisher, every media owner's inventory all in one place, whether they have one piece of inventory, it's one face, or whether they have 10,000 faces in a market. So when I was talking earlier about dashboards and the onset and accessibility, making it easy to buy, that's truly what we were after with this particular product. This is also all API first. It's built on an API first component, so everything from a data perspective that lives and breathes in our back end is fed or can be fed to an agency or a buyer's internal systems. So when we talk about inclusivity of data within MMM planning tools, media mix modeling planning tools, this was our approach, was to ensure that we had the ability to get the data out of our system, because they've probably already got their own systems that they don't necessarily want to use another new tool. However, if they do want to use a new tool, we've got a great tool. But in order for us to make this easy for brands, buyers, and advertisers to purchase out of home, we needed to ensure that we were able to get the data out of our system into existing systems. And those existing systems could be at the buyer or brand direct component, or it could be a third-party attribution provider. When we talk about out-of-home specifically and the ability to be able to provide efficacy, ROI, to prove out that out-of-home does in fact work, the attribution component really closes the gap. So we've got the planning, the buying, the purchasing, the execution, and then the attribution component after that. So again, everything from our perspective or from our system is able to go from an API directly to internal systems of planners and buyers for ease of use, or to third-party attribution providers if they so choose to do so. The tech stacks, so Vistar is here. Hivestack, all of the programmatic tech stacks also have access to take our data and API it directly into their systems from a programmatic perspective. Our impression multipliers and our math that's in the back end is fully accessible to the tech stacks to ensure that they're providing effective attribution and campaign delivery. And what's exciting is that we have decided to license our product because we've gotten a lot of questions from a global perspective. I speak a lot at various different conferences globally, and certainly we've had a lot of interest and a lot of coverage. So we've decided to, in an effort to assist and to help the industry overall, not everybody needs to invest millions of dollars to build their own system. We have this accessible if the inclination is there. Thank you. So we're very excited about that. And from a global perspective, you know, I always say with out-of-home specifically, it's a big media format. It's larger than life. So let's dream big for out-of-home and build something incredible together from a global perspective. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to, come on, where's the energy? Let's get a selfie up here. Everybody stand up, let's go, come on. I did.
All right, everybody make some noise. It's always nice. It's gonna, the energy will get captured in that photograph. Thank you so much, Amanda. All right, so we're gonna invite Mr. Prashant Verma, CEO of Pioneer Publicity, to join us on stage. He's got the questions, 3 questions that he's had to go through, a whole host of questions. 3 of them are gonna reach you right here. And all right, we've got the managing partner and CEO of Experia Group, who was actually going through the questions, found them a lot more exciting, and he decided to join us for this session. Please welcome Saibal Gupta, who's joining us right now. All right, sir, 3 questions. I know there were many.
Yeah. Hi, Amanda. How are you?
Hello, I'm well.
Welcome to the WASI.
Thank you.
So there are 40 odd questions was there. So out of that, I found interesting these 3 questions. One is Mr. Sugu Maran, Ministry of Malaysia. What is the policy makers, especially government officials, who draw the policy of media players' role in global OH ecosystem?
Could you repeat the question?
What is the policy makers, especially government officials, who draw the policy of media players' role in global OH ecosystem?
In the global ecosystem, so Unfortunately, it's quite fragmented. So when it comes to policymakers specifically, each market is different, each region is different, sometimes neighborhoods are different. So I'll speak specifically to the Canadian space, and I could speak to some other global markets as well. But there's a province in Canada called Quebec. It's a French-speaking province. And from a policy perspective, each neighborhood or borough has a different bylaw for out-of-home and for developing out-of-home assets. It has a different approach. You have to lobby different groups. So unfortunately, there isn't a global policy relative to out-of-home. There are privacy policies that can be blanketed, such as GDPR specifically. And in the US, there's something called CCPA. Those are sort of the gold standards. CCPA is California Consumer Privacy Act. In Canada, there's a number of new legislations that are coming into effect in various different regions, federally as well as municipality-wide. But unfortunately, there isn't a global blanket relative to policy. There is an organization called the World Out of Home Organization, which does a good job from an educational perspective to try to build guidelines specifically on the various different policies. They solicit most of the associations, the national associations that are similar to COMMB, from various different markets globally to understand what the legislation looks like. But from a policy perspective specifically, there isn't one set global standard.
Okay. Thank you. Second question what I found interesting is Bhavna Anand, Times OH. As per Canadian market experience, what solution would you like to propose to Indian outdoor industry to drive spends to outdoor industry by brands?
Ooh, I like that question. So I have to say I'm less familiar with the onset of data availability here, but I certainly think that data drives decisions. So I would encourage the use of data to ensure that there is an understanding of audience segmentation, of your ability to target contextually. Data is to me the biggest component. Not just in the Indian market, but in other markets. I do some work in the Saudi region as well, and we're working with some partners there to ensure that data is available and reporting capabilities are available. I think being able to feed the data into a media mix modeling software will just make the lives easier of the brands, the advertisers, and the buyers. And whatever that looks like from the local tools perspective, I think if we can make it more accessible, if we can make information more accessible, then out-of-home will increase. And again, that's part of the reason why digital gets such a massive spend, because the young planners and buyers that are working on Google AdWords, or they're working in Meta to plan their campaigns, they're literally buying based on a dashboard, based on information that's readily available. So we need to make it as easily available for out-of-home as it is in the other channels.
Thank you for the second answer. Third question is Binod Kumar, Adin Advertising Services. Are you, as you are technology lover, what do you think that PDOH space is going to look like in next 5 years?
Programmatic digital out-of-home specifically? I think it's going to grow exponentially. I think programmatic digital out-of-home is in its infancy in a number of different countries. Certainly Canada was one of the early adopters. I remember back in 2016, 17, Hivestack, Vistar were just sort of breaking into those markets specifically, and one of the companies that I was with at the time was an early adopter of programmatic digital out-of-home. So I think on a global perspective that it's certainly trending in the right direction. I do think that it's a systematic delivery for context. So it's never going to, in my personal opinion, it's never going to take away from or solely do rid of traditional out-of-home. I think traditional will always have its place. I think what programmatic digital out-of-home offers is the ability to systematically and automatically deliver a contextually relevant message to your specific audience, whereas traditional will provide you more of that reach and the frequency and sort of that grand scale. Not that programmatic can't provide that, but I think it's just more contextual.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Great questions. Thanks, guys.
All right, all right. And which one of the three questions walks away with the prize money?
I have to say I really like the programmatic question. So the last question, programmatic digital home question.
And the name of the winner is, sir?
Name of the winner is Vinod Kumar, Add-in Advertising Services.
Where is Vinod Kumar? Can we have you join us here, sir? Come on up, come on up. Everybody put your hands together, make some noise. Can we have the check brought out onto stage? Please join us, Amanda, please join us. Saibal, thank you so much. Congratulations, Vinod. It's all yours. The contest brought to you by Alak Advertising and Publicity. Ladies and gentlemen, you ask a question, you stand a chance to walk away with a prize. Lovely, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, that check goes back with us, but you definitely get the prize money. Congratulations. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you so much, Saibal. Thank you very much. All right. But 1 second again, memento time. All right, all right. I need to get back into that. Amanda, can you please join us once again? Sir, thank you for not walking away. You knew that there was a memento, right? So let's have that beautiful memento brought onto stage. Here it is.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
You know the same kind of applause when Amanda joined us on stage. Put your hands together, make some noise. Come on. That was quite a session. From the knowledge sharing to the selfie, it was all fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.